If you want to support the channel, then please check out my Patreon page to gain access to exclusive videos, take part in Q&As, and watch my retrospectives before they go live on YouTube. Hi everyone, it's Oliver Harper here. The video you're about to see is an interview I did with makeup and creature effects expert Gino Acevedo. We recorded this last year in October. It was released as a podcast for my patrons as part of my Film Club series. It's now being released as a video with clips and behind the scenes material. Gino worked on movies such as Elm Street Part 5, Alien 3, Independence Day, Godzilla, and then he went on to work on the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit trilogies, and the Planet of the Apes films. Hope you find this video entertaining and informative. Okay, so Gino, the first question for you. So what inspires you to get into the film industry, and in particular the makeup effects side of filmmaking?
I guess, it goes way back to ever since I was a kid, and just, loving movies for one thing. But for me, I think, probably watching the old classic Universal monsters, the Wolfman, Frankenstein, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and the Creature happens to be one of my favorite ones. But seeing that kind of stuff as a kid, and I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona in the States, and every Saturday morning there used to be a TV show at from 10:30 to 12 o'clock called The World Beyond, and they would show all the classic movies and that kind of stuff. And so I just always loved watching that. But it wasn't until really to get into the makeup side of stuff when I saw the original Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston. And that came out in '64, I think, which is the year that I was born. But I didn't see it till I was probably 7 or 8. And I went with a cousin to go see it, and it was just unbelievable because I always loved apes. I'd always go to the zoo, and the first place I'd go to is go see the chimps and the gorillas and the orangutans, and just sit there and look at them, and just, because what I was always amazed by them is with the apes is like they're just so intelligent, and it's like when you're looking at them, they're studying you as much as you're studying them. I was blown away, and just blown away by the characters, and really didn't even realize or understand that they were actually even makeups. And I just thought, they're apes. I knew they could talk. Yeah, that kind of thing. And then I got to see a documentary on the amazing gentleman by the name of John Chambers, who developed the whole prosthetics and the whole look of the Planet of the Apes. And it was just on how he developed the process, and how, everything from the life casting of like Roddy McDowall, sculpting the pieces, running the stuff out of this stuff called the foam rubber, and gluing the pieces onto the actors. And for me, the magic of it was when they put the coloration on. And so, because as soon as you glue on the appliance, you can obviously see what's the appliance and what's the skin. But the magic comes in is like when you actually add the flesh tones and everything blends in together, and it all becomes one unified piece, which is really incredible. And then the actor starts to kind of move around and looks in a mirror, and it really brings a piece to life. And that's one thing I still love about, doing makeups today. It's like it's putting on the prosthetic, and then putting on the color. One of the first colors that I like to use is the red, because for me it's like putting life back into the pieces. So the red is like blood. You're giving life to the pieces and everything, adding the red to it, the yellows and browns and all that kind of stuff. Seeing that documentary on John Chambers, and I was just so amazed as like how he could transform Roddy McDowall into that chimpanzee. And it was just a huge fascination. And it wasn't until years later that I'll never forget going to the grocery store with my mom. And how like when you go into the grocery store and the checkout stand where they've got all the magazines and stuff, but they had one they had the famous monsters, and they had another one called just Monsters, I think it was. But anyways, it had on the cover, it had this character called the Reptile. It was probably like 1950s movie. And I looked at it, and I just thought, and I started flicking through it, and they showed all these black and white pictures of a lot of the makeup artists, doing the makeups and things. And I was just blown away. It's like, Mom, can I please have this? Can I please have this? She goes, oh my God, no, that's horrible. It's terrible. I said, look at the cover of that. It's like, no, please, 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 So begged her, and my mom was great. She finally let me have it. So I took it home and just, looked at it and read it from cover to cover. And I think that was one of the things that really, talk about getting, bit by the bug. That was probably one of them. But it was really Planet of the Apes. But for the luck of me, the thing that really opened the door for me was when I was 18, I started at a Halloween company in Phoenix, Arizona called Imagineering. So Imagineering was was a company that owned by this gentleman by the name of Larry Liff, who's like my second dad now. But Larry came up with this stuff. You remember this stuff?
Vampire. Yes. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah,
Vampire
like
blood,
different brands
all
of
that kind
it.
of stuff.
Yeah.
And this one called the oozing orb.
Orb. Amazing.
But anyways, but as a kid, I used to always use this stuff for Halloween, and just and played around with it. And those plastic vampire teeth, you'd put them in, and they'd cut the crap out of your gums because they never fit quite right. Anyways, but the way that I got to meet Larry and with his company was my old science teacher back in 7th and 8th grade, Frances Reinprecht, had a student teacher that just started with him, and she had just married Larry Liff. And anyways, they were talking, and she said, well, my husband owns this Halloween company, and my friend Francis, by this time I'd moved on to high school. And he says, one of my ex-students, who I still keep in touch with, was really into monsters and makeup and all that kind of stuff. I said, when he's about to graduate from high school, maybe we can get them together, then and have an interview. And so that did happen, and just by chance, you got to go and interview with Larry, and Larry hired me, and you went to the factory, where they were making all this stuff, and I'll never forget, going there for the first day, and walking through the factory. Larry gave me this tour, but I felt like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory because the doors opened up, and I swear it's like there was a machine over here going making the vampire blood, and something else making this fake skin and all this stuff, and I was in heaven. I thought this is just incredible. And Larry had said, he says, look, I want to start making some latex masks and stuff. And he said, do you know how to sculpt? And I said, yeah, I did. And I lied, and so I figured, how hard can it be? And so he said, but look, it's not going to happen for probably another 6 months or so. And I just, I don't have a position for you. And, I don't think you want to work out on the line, making the vampire blood and all that. And I said, yes, I do. Yeah. And so Larry said, well, okay, well, if you want to do that, it's, it's pretty tedious and pretty monotonous work. But so he put me to work out there. And for 6 months, I worked all around the factory, making, the vampire blood and all this other kind of stuff. And then after the 6 months, Larry said, he says, oh, you're still here. Okay. Well, you must have some determination. So I guess I'll hang on to you. And so that's when he gave me my own little room, my own little mini laboratory. And I just kind of taught myself how to sculpt and how to start, making some masks and things. And that's kind of how it all started. And just being at the right place at the right time and meeting the right people, but also just being really, persevering, but also really taking it all on, and just, even in all my spare time, I would draw and I would sculpt and just, trying to get better and better. Unfortunately, back in those days, we didn't have YouTube, you can go to, we can show you how to do everything. But I had a few makeup books. And one of the great things as well about this company was that there was a makeup artist who was in Los Angeles, and his name is Barry Coper. And now Barry was head of makeup at CBS in Hollywood, and Barry and Larry were friends. But Barry would come out to Imagineering once a year to do the makeups for the new products and stuff for the catalog. And so Barry and I became really good friends, and Barry kind of took me under his wing because I think I reminded him a bit of himself when he was a kid, and learning stuff. And the whole ironic thing about this whole thing, it still blows me away today, is like Barry was actually taught by John Chambers. It's like, how spooky is that? And so Barry introduced me to John. I got to meet John, and that was just really an incredible time. And Barry was always saying, he says, you should come out to LA, come work in the industry out here. And it's like, oh, I don't know. That's pretty, that's pretty big time out there. I'm not quite ready for that. And so Barry kept, and I stayed with the Halloween company for a few years. And Barry kept saying, says, look, come out. I want you to come out here. And so finally I went out in my early 20s to LA. And one of the first gigs that I did out there, that Barry got me a job on, was over at NBC this time. But it was there's an actor. His name's he's an actor, but he's a presenter as well. Dick Clark. You ever hear of Dick Clark?
Yeah, I know Dick Clark. Yeah,
American Bandstand and all that kind of stuff. But he was doing a Friday night show called Friday Night Surprise, and they were doing a little parody of an old show back in the 50s called Masquerade. And
Mm.
what they would do is that they would take actors and make them up as other actors, and it was like an audience participation thing where they had to guess who they were by questions and that kind of stuff. And in this case, I had to make up Alan Hale and Bob Denver from Gilligan's Island, and that was like my first gig there. And then after that, then I started working with my friend Dave Miller, who hired me on Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5.
Well, there you go. Yeah, because that's an interesting one, because that's your first sort of big feature film, wasn't it? Because
It was,
that,
yeah.
that film has a notoriously had a kind of rushed production, didn't it?
It did, yeah, yeah. And Dave Miller, of course, was an amazing artist, and he's a great friend. But Dave developed the look of the first Nightmare on Elm Street on Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. And so by this time, it was Part 5, and that he was doing it once again. And Dave said, he says, "Hey, you want to come help me, work on Freddy and sculpt Freddy?" It's like, yeah. So that was pretty incredible. So that was like my first gig, and that was just, again, just meeting people, and Dave introducing me to some incredible artists, and that just kind of just spread. And I was in LA for I think about 15 years, I think, before I came out here to New Zealand.
Well, that's crazy. I mean, with the production of Elm Street 5, was it a completely different experience to TV, what you'd done before? Was it, or just kind of a similar process where you were just like given your task to work on the makeup and then you were just kind of done? Or was there, because obviously there's been quite a few documentaries about Elm Street itself, and it's kind of, because New Line Cinema were kind of pumping these films out really quickly during this period. Right. Was there kind of a sense when you're on Elm Street 5 that there was a kind of rush to the end to get it done? Were you under a lot of pressure?
If there was, I didn't really know it, just because it was my first film to really work on. So I worked with Dave and with with others in the workshop, working on the prosthetics and all the different props and things. And because there were so many different gags that were happening, Dave's job was to work on Freddy himself, on Robert Englund, designing his makeup and some other bits and props in there, but also, of course, the Freddy baby. Dave designed and did that. And there were a few other makeup effects groups that did, quite a bit of the other effects as well. And again, that could have been something because it was such a short limit of time to work on the stuff that they had to farm stuff out, because there's no way that maybe Dave could have taken everything on, to meet the deadline at that time.
Also, you've got Alien 3 as part of your credits. Now, you sent me a couple of photos in the past, which are pretty incredible. Now, Alien 3 has always been a sort of fascinating film for the fans, probably down to its sort of troubled production. Did you get involved in the early stages of the production before the director was replaced by David Fincher, and what creature effects did you help out on?
Again, I was already in LA, and a friend of mine that I met at Dave's shop, he's a brilliant artist, and his name is Mitch Coughlin. And Mitch was working at Dave's, and we became flatmates. And then Mitch had gone on to work on another film called Tremors, and then he was working with Amalgamated Dynamics with the great Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff. Then Mitch had said, he says, "Oh, look, I've got some friends that are Alec and Tom. They're looking for sculptors to help make some masks for an upcoming show they've got." And of course, it was called Point Break. And so I went to go interview with Alec and Tom, and they, we got on greatly, and they hired me because of my mask making background that I had back in Phoenix. And so I helped, create the masks, and my job was to, I sculpted the Jimmy Carter mask.
Oh, really?
For that show. My experience of mask making and, making multiple masks and, kind of not so much a mass production in this case, but at least having that kind of information to give to them. And so we worked on that, and that was incredible. And then it was, I'll never forget, it was one day that Alec and Tom said, it's like, we've got another show coming up, but it's not going to be here. It's going to be over in the UK. We're going to be doing Alien 3. It's like, wow, I'm going to be working on an Alien film. I said, wow, that's so cool. And I had no idea that they were even going to, ask me to join them. And they asked me, we're only allowed to take, I think it was five Americans over there. Again, and the rest of the crew had to be English.
Oh,
And they
the
said,
union
would you?
stuff, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And they said, would you be interested in coming out with us? And it's like, yeah,
Wow,
to work on
yeah.
an alien film. It's like, holy shit. And
Was there a lot of like hype or like excitement in the industry that another Alien film was happening?
there was, yeah, I think definitely. And I think because of course there was Aliens, which was huge, and so
Yeah.
it was going to be something really, really pretty massive to step up to. But everything had to be built because of the time frame. Everything had to be built over there, so we couldn't build anything in the shop in Los Angeles, unfortunately. So we had to go over there to go set up a shop over at Pinewood Studios. And so it was my first time out of the states, really, besides like going to
Yeah.
Mexico and stuff. So it was huge for me.
So because I remember because in our early conversations you said you were sort of flying over to the UK and then the news had come through that David
That's
Fincher
right. Yeah.
was taking over. Everyone was just like, "Who's this guy?"
Yeah, because at first, it was Vincent Ward, who was actually a New
Yeah.
Zealander. He's a New Zealand director.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I didn't really know any of Vincent's work or anything like that. It's like, well, cool. He's going to direct it, and then so traveling from L.A. to London, somewhere about here, the shit hit the fan, and when we landed, it's like we found out that this young gentleman by the name of David Fincher was going to be directing Alien 3. And it turns out that we were told that David Fincher, he was kind of like the hot ticket at the moment because he had just finished directing Madonna's Vogue videos and that kind of stuff. And it's like, this guy's going to direct an Alien film? It's like, really? And but yeah, so we met David, and David was we were all really young. It's like, even Alec and Tom were just a few years older than I am. And David was probably the same age as Alec and Tom. And it was just like this young guy, but he was, you could tell right away that when it's just with look in his eyes that he was very determined and that he had, an incredible experience behind those eyes. And, but he was brilliant to work with and just so, and yeah, it was so much fun. But at the same time, it was really hard for him, just because he was the studios were just, I think they were so wary about, handing this huge project over to this young guy that they just kind of, really stood over his shoulders, way too much. I really wish that they would have just let David do what he really wanted to do. And I think it could have been, a much better film, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I think the sort of the work print or the special edition cut they put out, about a decade ago, I thought was a big improvement, but it's still kind of like, I think there's still a fine line between like melding the theatrical cut with the extended cut, because there's some things they've kind of taken out some scenes or put some extra ones in. But I think it's a shame, isn't it? Because Dave Fincher, I think, felt over the years, obviously kind of somewhat disowned it, that he was kind of screwed over by the British crew, who were just kind of old dusty men who loved Ridley Scott and didn't want to work with this young American. And they obviously, in hindsight, they'd probably think completely different now, because he's become one of the most sort of accomplished directors out there.
The same thing happened to James Cameron, when they were doing Aliens, as far as just the English crew.
Oh yeah.
It's
they're all kind of, I suppose, somewhat stuck in their ways, and having the Americans come over and replacing Ridley, which is a bit of a shame. Obviously, because you'd had, because some of the stuff you'd worked on obviously got cut out of the theatrical cut, because some of the images you sent, you got the giant face hugger, the queen egg layer, as it were, it kind of lays the queen.
So we definitely did that. We did and we had an incredible English crew, and very talented artists there, and one of them was Chris Halls, or Chris Cunningham now.
Yes.
Seen his stuff that he's done. And Chris he might have been like 16, 17 at the time, just incredibly talented.
Wasn't Stephen Norrington kind of working on it
Steve
as well?
Norrington was with us, yeah, absolutely. And Stephen had worked with Alec and Tom on Aliens as well.
That's right.
And Stephen was really incredible. And Stephen's he's a great mechanic, and he's a great sculptor, and I think he's a great director as well.
Yeah, I mean, would you, obviously, because you'd mentioned the sort of the difficulty of the production, but once it all kind of finished, were you sort of happy with the end results, or when you went to see the film itself, were you just like, oh, this is a bit depressing, for the end of Ripley?
It was interesting. It was like when we got to see it, I think probably the thing that bothered me the most was sadly some of the work that Boss Films did. And not that they did bad work, but it was just the time, the technology that they had back then of doing the go motion puppets of the alien. And I just didn't feel like that kind of stuff just really cut in with Tom and stuff. And of course, there's no way that we can get Tom to climb on the ceilings and do all that kind of stuff and run and all that. So I totally, obviously, nowadays it would have been all CG stuff, but it was it was that kind of stuff that just bothered me a little bit. But at the same time, I still enjoyed the film, and just because the fact of being there and seeing how hard everybody worked, and they were so passionate about it. And the sets were just incredible. It was like there's nothing better than the English crew that can build these incredible sets, and plus we were there at Pinewood Studios, and and as I said, the sets were just incredible there, and the makeup team were just incredible, and we had our team making the suits and the chest burster and the face huggers, and we even had to do a giant a big ox, because originally the alien was gonna burst out of an ox, and so we had this incredible set. It was in an abattoir, and I'll never forget that. It's like this incredible abattoir in there, and they had all this hanging meat and stuff in there, and it wasn't rubber. It was all real stuff. It was like
oh,
wow.
It must have stank,
Oh yeah. And the great thing was I got to do a lot of puppeteering with the guys as well. There's a scene where the we called it the Bambi burster comes out of the ox and starts to kind of walk away, and so we would puppeteer it, just kind of rod puppeteer it, and then they erased us out of that.
That shot is really impressive in the film. I think that shot is really good.
Yeah. And then it wasn't until we kind of wrapped up there that they still wanted to do some more filming, and so we were going to pack up and go back to LA and go back to 20th Century Fox and pick up some more pickups. And by this time, they decided that they didn't want it to come out of the ox anymore, and it was really sad because that was such a cool scene. But I think they have it in the extended now. But there's a scene where one of the characters just kind of picks up the face hugger.
Yeah.
We call it the super face hugger. Picks it up and it's like, what the hell is this? And it's like, but then anyways, back in LA, by then they wanted it to come out of a dog, and so it came out of a Rottweiler.
Do you think it kind of made more sense for it to come out of a dog because of the speed of the dog compared to an ox? Do you think? Possibly,
but I just think because of the size of it. It's like, this thing bursts out of a dog. I mean, it's, a dog is, even though it's a Rottweiler, it's pretty big, but this thing was even, pretty damn big. I just love the fact that, the stuff that we shot of the ox itself, of pushing and bursting through, the belly of this ox that was hanging upside down, was just really incredible, really beautiful work.
Were you, because obviously HR Giga was kind of helping out with some of the designs, but a lot of them kind of did get sort of, I suppose, sort of simplified by the team. Was there sort of a worry that a lot of his work may just sort of get completely erased for number 3, or was there a sense that people wanted more of Giga's work in it? Was there sort of, I suppose, a sort of fine line of putting enough of Giga's work in it, but sort of creating something a bit different?
Well, I mean, obviously it was, very inspired by Giga. And and Alec and Tom were really pushing for him to come out to the studio and to work with us. And it was like, because I'm a huge Giga fan, even way before, Aliens and all that kind of stuff. And I was really hoping it was going to come out, but I think he was just so pissed off about the whole thing of how he was treated and not asked in the beginning. And there's a few stories that I've heard about that, so he never came out. But Alec and Tom did go to visit him, which is pretty cool. And Giga would always send through, this is before the days of email and stuff, but we had faxes. So Giga would send through his just pen and ink, just ballpoint pen drawing sketches and stuff of the alien, for Alec and Tom to use as inspiration, which I'm sure a lot of that stuff was put into the final design.
That is kind of strange stuff, isn't it? What Giga had designed, where like had lips at the end on the aliens. The mouth was a bit kind of strange, but still that sort of somewhat sort of sexualized kind of elements he'd had from his earlier work, kind of making its way through. Obviously, because you'd come to work on Species a couple of years later, wouldn't you? So you get, I suppose, a second opportunity to sort of work on a Giga kind of design. But after Alien 3, you had kind of made the jump to Death Becomes Her, because obviously that movie would wow a lot of people with its digital effects at the time. But you were sort of puppeteering on that. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we got back back to ADI. Back in Los Angeles, and that was the next job that Alec and Tom got for the shop, was Death Becomes Her. And we were all very excited about that because it had such a great cast, with Meryl Streep, Goldie Hawn, and Bruce Willis. And it was exciting for me from the standpoint of that we were going to create these human likenesses of the characters. And it's like, I as much as I love doing monsters and all that kind of stuff, I love probably doing human stuff more, just because it's more challenging. And it's even like when you're doing a makeup on somebody, especially like an old age makeup, if you don't get something right, the audience is going to know it right away. It's going to take their mind out of the film, and you've lost them. And so one of my specialties was always painting. I always loved airbrushing and painting, but doing like the final finessing on the puppets and things. And so when we got to do these puppets of Meryl Streep and Goldie, it was pretty exciting. And plus, we were playing around with a new material at the time, which everybody uses now, but it was a silicone material instead of just foam rubber. And the foam rubber is an amazing material, and it's great, and it's fairly easy to work with. But the problem with the foam rubber is that it's very opaque. And so if it's not shot well, it just looks like a piece of foam rubber, looks dead. But the great thing about the silicone is because it already starts out with a translucency like our skin. And so when the light hits it, it scatters within there as opposed to just bouncing off. And so we were playing around with this material, and just slightly prior to Death Becomes Her, we were playing around with it. And the problem with the silicone is that nothing sticks to silicone except silicone. And so trying to come up with a paint system that would stick to the silicone was quite a challenge. And I was able to work out something where I used acrylic paints. Like when I normally paint, I do a lot of washes and things just to build up the colors, to even try to make it feel more translucent. And but of course the acrylic paints wouldn't stick to the silicone. But then I found by using a silicone adhesive and thinning it down with quite a nasty solvent called methylene chloride, and thinning that down to like the viscosity of like milk, I guess you could say. And I would spray that on top of my paint job. And what would happen is that the methylene chloride was so aggressive that it would bite through my layers of paint and bond to the base silicone layer and kind of sandwich, my paint job in there. And it stuck really, really well. And it just looked beautiful. And so I think that was how we were able to really pull off the puppets that we did on Death Becomes Her. And again, at this time, it's like, with the CG stuff, it was fairly newish. And so, so our job was to try to use physical puppets as much as possible, and then have it switched over to the CG stuff, which ILM did such an amazing job with. And it's like, I just wish more, in fact, it's happening now where, shows are doing a bit more of a combination of doing practical and digital, as opposed to it just being, 90% digital, because, this happened for a long period of time because the CG stuff was the flavor of the month, and there was just so much bad, shitty CG stuff out there. Species is a great example of that. It's just, again, it's like, love the film, love Nastasha Henstridge, but in our puppets, that we built over with Steve Johnson at XFX, we're just
because you
really
made
incredible.
that leap so you changed from ADI to Steve Johnson's.
I was hired by my friend Norman Cabrera, who is an amazing effects artist and who worked a lot with Steve Johnson. And Norman knew that I was such a huge Giger fan. And he said, look, we're doing Species. It was already designed by Giger and stuff. And, we'd love to have you come out to do your paint magic on it. So I, went out there and did that and worked, side by side with Norman on that. And the cool thing about that, and I wish I've got to find a fact somewhere, but Steve would send pictures back to Giger, on the process of Sill, and pretty much following a lot of his designs and stuff. And but then when he finally saw the finished one of the painting, he marveled at the paint job, that he really loved the paint job on it. And I said, oh, okay,
Oh, I see. Excellent.
that was really incredible. Yeah.
You'll see, because Species would again have kind of visual effects work by Boss Film, because you were sort of disappointed with the sort of the studios or the industry sort of shifting to kind of focus a little bit more on computer effects, because it was like the flavor of the month, and it was this new tool that was going to make everything a lot easier and make everything look better, which wasn't really the case on Species, was it? Because
No.
all these great kind of puppetry work and makeup work with a sort of shown sort of like quick flashes, don't they, when she's kind of attacking people. You sort of see those, all that she's getting images in her head where you can see this amazing work. But when it comes to the end, when you see Syl in all her forms, it's kind of very ropey CG. And I've talked to my friends about this over the years, and Boss Film, I don't think really made that successful transition to computer effects. I don't think, because their optical days of, like shooting on 65mm, that comes to CG, it was nowhere near as good as ILM at the time.
No, definitely, and it just really showed, unfortunately. But I think they could have picked their shots a bit better, as opposed to having Syl, come into the camera like this. It's like, whoa, don't do that. It's like you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't even do that with a puppet, You just the limitations of things. But anyways, it was what it was, and it was incredible project to work on. I'm very proud of it.
Well, see, now you'd leap on to, two Roland Emmerich movies with Independence Day and Godzilla. Now, at the time, because now you kind of jump. Was it still part of Steve Johnson's team, or had you made a sort of leap to another effects company? I think it was Totopoulos, wasn't it?
Patrick Totopoulos, yeah.
Because you're jumping from different company, I'll presume you're just working as a sort of freelance basis, right? So you
definitely, yeah.
Yeah,
and which I'm still doing to these days. It's like I'm still a freelance artist, working at Weta. I've been here for almost 24 years now.
You should be demanding a full-time contract now. I'm not leaving.
I like being a freelancer. It's all right. But yeah, and what happened was a friend of mine, a guy Himber, who was working with Patrick Totopoulos, was saying that they were going to be making Independence Day, and which was going to be, I think at the time they called it War of the Worlds. He said, I'd really like you to meet Patrick, and because we could really use your skills and painting and that kind of stuff, and sculpting. I did a lot of sculpting as well, but I was more of a painter than a sculptor. And so I wanted to go meet Patrick, and of course we hit it off right away. Patrick's a great guy. He's just incredibly talented, and I think a lot of us didn't really know or really understand the scope of Independence Day, of how big it was. And so Patrick had designed the aliens and stuff for it, which was really cool. And the thing with Patrick is that Patrick has these, he thinks outside the square. He tries to think of something that we haven't seen before, which I think is so important. And so that's why those designs are just so unique and just so cool. And for me, as an artist, as a painter, is like seeing something so unique like that was just, very exciting for me to try to develop a paint scheme for that. I had hired a guy that I know, his name's Tom Colleen, who's another airbrush artist, but I saw him painting, airbrushing t-shirts, doing some really incredible stuff and illustrations and I thought this got to be a great painter. And so we got to become friends and hired him on to help out with the paint schemes on the aliens. But we had this little tiny shop in North Hollywood, and it was a pretty crappy shop to be honest. And we built all these really cool suits and everything. And it wasn't until they had already started shooting some of the stuff, and it was a model builder and pyrotechnics guy. His name's Joe Viscosol, who sadly has passed away now, but he's a huge pioneer in the industry. And we got to see the footage. We went to set and saw the footage of the first attack and the huge fireball that comes down the street, comes that. Yeah. And it was just, we were like, holy shit. I said, so we're not working on some piece of crap movie. This is going to be really good.
Had you done some research beforehand? Had you watched like Roland Emmerich's kind of Stargate and sort of think, okay, this is what the
Yeah, yeah.
guys kind
A
of made.
huge fan of his stuff and everything. And again, that was Patrick Tatopoulos as well who designed that stuff. And that's where Guy Hember had also worked with Patrick on that. Because I hadn't read the script or anything, so I didn't really know much about it. But it wasn't until then that I realized this could be something really cool.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
was pretty amazing. It's like, and I got to go on set and do some puppeteering of when they have where they think it's a dead alien. They have the full, the exoskeleton laying on the
Oh
table and
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
like that, and then they cut it open, and so the whole thing splits open like that, and then they start peeling away the thing. But also, as I mentioned, the silicone stuff. It's like, I brought that material to Patrick. I said, this is a great material that we worked with on Death Becomes Her. It's great, it's very translucent, and I'm suggesting that we make the aliens out of the silicone, and which gives it just that much more of a really really unique kind of look.
It looks more
And
organic, doesn't it?
exactly, absolutely, yeah. And so and for that scene of where the thing pops open and you see like it's covered with all this like mucus and everything, and we had these sheets of really thin translucent silicone that we had painted, and in the slime we mixed a lot of pearlescence into the slime, just to make it look quite unworldly and everything. And we start to peel them all away off the surface, and then it shows the alien, the main alien, inside of there, which is pretty cool.
Because Independence Day, for today, it's still kind of fondly remembered for its miniature work and its kind of practical, kind of alien
Incredible.
effects. It's just a shame that some of the when they sort of double it with CG, doesn't quite hold up. But I mean, because the budget for that film is actually surprisingly quite small for its time, like 50 million, I think it was. So I mean, they achieved so much just down to. That was the disappointing thing, was when they did the sequel years later, they just used no miniatures at all, and everyone was just like, oh, it's this CG overload, which was kind of heartbreaking, because it was that's what made it special, I think, just seeing the White House just go boom, it like explodes, ginormous miniature.
Incredible. Yeah.
Now, because obviously Independence Day, massive hit, everyone was kind of super excited for Godzilla, because the teaser trailer was like really like mind blowing. The kids in the museum, the big foot comes through the ceiling, everyone was just like wow, and then like seeing the guy on that sort of on that pier just running along, the things were exploding behind him. Just as a teenager, I was just like, this is going to be incredible. But unfortunately, I saw Godzilla when it was would have been like 16, so miserable weather that day in the UK, which is typical. And then you go and see a film which is basically just raining throughout the entire bloody thing. Made it more depressing, but there was this, I think the fans are very upset with the changes to the look of Godzilla. Now,
sure.
For you working on that, was there a bit of like, what the? It doesn't look like Godzilla. What's going on? I mean, were you just kind of just like, well, just go with it and just kind of do the work to the best I can and sort of hope for the best with this film?
No, totally. It's like I was kind of like on both sides of the fence on that one, because
you were a big fan of monsters, weren't you? So
yeah, and the Godzilla stuff. But I think in this case, again, just because I love Patrick's work and stuff, that he wanted to do something, something a bit different, something a bit more kind of streamlined, so something that wasn't so big, lumbersome and kind of clunky. He wanted something like a streamlined and something that could just move quite fast and everything. So I think his design was pretty cool, and considering what a lot of people are thinking about it. But I still enjoy the film, and it was a lot of fun to work on. And again, it was about the time when more and more CG was kind of taking over the practical effects. But we did a huge amount of practical effects, including especially with the babies and the mama. We had guys in suits, and which was so cool, because in camera you could just they're there, it's real. And then the CG stuff in it is actually pretty damn good, I've got to say. They did a really good job at copying our stuff, and we helped them out as much as possible, by giving them our maquettes and any sort of skin textures and paint masters or anything like that, because obviously we wanted their stuff to look as good as ours, and so everything tied in together. So I think it all blended together, pretty damn good, for the stuff they did.
I think the film still sort of stands up quite well for its visual effects side of things. I think there was kind of especially with the miniatures and things like that, they still kind of it's still that it's basically, the Independence Day team with basically more money thrown at them because it was such a massive film. Independence Day made so much money, they're going to throw everything at them for Godzilla. Obviously now, because after Godzilla, you kind of would now make this leap to New Zealand. You jumped onto Lord of the Rings.
It was, yeah. So that was about in 98, I guess it was, yeah. I was working over at K&B, just slightly prior to this. I was working over at K&B Effects, who's owned by Howard Berger, Greg Nicotero, and Bob Kurtzman. So we're working on a movie called Spawn.
Because you've now worked with all the best makeup guys or creature guys in the industry.
The only one that I hadn't had a chance to work with was Stan Winston, sadly. Never had a chance to work with Stan because I was just busy working with the other guys.
Yeah. I'd love to know about Spawn, actually, because that was, the great kind of suit, the great sort of practical stuff to it, but would just, again, CGI had went a bit too far, hadn't it?
Yeah.
With the abuse button,
Yeah. But I was hired by Howard. He says, I'd love to bring you over to do some sculpting. I said, I want you to sculpt the Spawn suit. And it's like, you want me to sculpt the suit? Whoa. I said, well, Howard, I sculpt a bit, but I don't know about doing a suit. He says, come on, you'll be fine. You can do it. Howard hired myself and my friend Bill Zahn to sculpt the suit. It was our job to sculpt the suit, stuff based on a maquette. And so I'll send you some pictures of the sculptures and stuff. So Bill and I sculpted the suits, and also I designed the paint schemes for we call it the burnt Simmons. When he has his mask off of just his burnt kind of look, and even went on set with Howard and helped apply the makeup on Michael J. White, who played Spawn.
Great guy.
But it was just an incredible show, and I think even then some of the CG stuff in that was actually pretty good. It's very comic booky, so I think it kind of it felt like a comic book, and even like with the cape. His cape, which was like a character in itself. I thought they did a really beautiful job, with that kind of stuff.
When the things come out, like the blades come out of them, is really quite interesting. And when when the clown turns into the big monster and he battles Spawn on top of that building, that stands up really well. But I think down to the fact that it's nighttime, it's raining, they can hide a lot the CG. Yeah. But I think when they go to hell, it goes a little bit bonkers, doesn't it? It's like CG, do all CG,
Yeah. And that's when I think they just go too much, where they think that we can make 200 million Spawn characters because we can. And I think they do that on so many films where just they totally blow it there, where they just go over the top with too many characters, where it just feels like, well, that's just not possible. And so it was during Spawn that Howard came to me and he said, I've got these friends that are from this place called New Zealand, and I feel like I've heard of that. And he said, Richard Taylor and his wife Tanya Roger own this company called Weta Workshop. And at the time, they did a lot of the effects on the Hercules and Xena TV show.
Oh, right.
And I said, oh, yeah, I love that stuff. And he said, well, look, they're looking to recruit people to take them back to New Zealand because they're going to be working on a remake of King Kong. And I said,
really? That early on?
Yeah. And so that was going to happen before Lord of the Rings.
Wow.
And I said, well, who's directing it? And they said, oh, Peter Jackson. And I was like, sorry, Pete. His house lives just like a block away from here, so he could probably hear me. But I didn't know who he was, and I didn't know Meet the Feebles or Brain Dead or any of that kind of stuff.
Oh, you hadn't seen The Frighteners either by that point?
No. Yeah. Oh no, actually, I did see The Frighteners. Yeah.
That's a great movie.
Love The Frighteners. Yeah. But didn't pay attention to who directed it. But then what happened is, I told Richard, I said, look, I'd love to come out, and Richard said, because of your background of painting and prosthetics and that kind of stuff, that's one of the things that we're kind of lacking back at the shop, and we'd love for you to come back and teach our guys, basically what suck your brain out. And I said, oh, that'd be great. I'd love that. And anyways, we kept in touch. But then, of course, by now I had gone to work on Godzilla with Patrick. and the studios pulled the plug on King Kong because we were doing Godzilla, and Rick Baker was doing Mighty Joe Young. And the studios said, we're not going to do another giant gorilla thing, so they pulled the plug. But Richard, came back and said, look, we've got another project for you we'd love to bring you back on. And of course, it was Lord of the Rings.
Obviously, now because you'd kind of moved more away from the practical stuff into sort of the digital world. Also, you still kind of, I presume you still do sort of the practical makeup stuff on the actors and so forth. But was Lord of the Rings kind of like the trilogy itself? And obviously, there's Hobbit as well, which is kind of, I think, went more the digital realm. Did you find it to be sort of the biggest challenge of your career working on those movies?
Absolutely, it was just it was mind-boggling the amount of work that they were going to do. I'll never forget. When Richard, when I came out for the first time, Richard and I made a deal. It says, come out for 3 months. See how you like working with us and how we like working with you. And if it doesn't work out, well, hey, you had a free trip out to New Zealand, and so I came out. And by this time, they had already been designing a lot of stuff on Lord of the Rings as far as maquettes and illustrations. And of course, they had the great Alan Lee and John Howe, at the helm, designing incredible stuff. And they had already been into it for a few months. And when I came through the workshop, I saw the designs and everything. And as I mentioned before, to see something new and so fresh just really made it so exciting for me to know that I was going to, develop the paint schemes for some of these things because it was so different. And I think a lot of it was just because they're so far away from the Hollywood scene that they're just, they're not jaded by the thing at all. And so their designs and everything were just so cool and just so original. It was really exciting.
That's a great thing of Lord of the Rings itself, because it was such a great mix of everything. It wasn't just because at the time it was because ILM and George Lucas was going so far with the digital effects, but obviously they didn't shooting on digital cameras at the time, which were a bit, I think at the time it seemed quite radical, but now those cameras are just a bit shit, sort of stuck in that 2K resolution. But Lord of the Rings had incredible miniatures, had the guys in makeup, all these kind of monsters, and CG, where they were doing stuff that were kind of matching ILM and even probably outdoing them in some cases, because they'd obviously, I think Peter Jackson had invested in the Silicon Graphics stuff with the Frighteners, and over this number of years, they kind of really mastered that technology. But yeah, for you, it must be because there's so much to those films, to sort of pick apart and discover what there's each sections of those kind of films and what the effects artists did. But for you, I mean, it's just to digress and sort of pick apart what you've done must be a minefield of so much stuff you kind of worked on.
So much stuff. I mean, but the really incredible thing was, again, so much of the film was so practical, and again, with the costumes, the makeup, but also the locations. And today it's like so much stuff is in the studios and it's green screen and replaced by, digital stuff. But in this case, it's like we were all on locations, and I've probably seen more of New Zealand than a lot of New Zealanders have seen. But the locations are just, well, the proof is in the pudding. It's on screen.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, there was one time we were down in Queenstown, which is down at the bottom of the South Island, and this place called Paradise. And it's literally paradise. I mean, it's just really beautiful. And I was sitting having a break at the outside of our makeup trailer, and I called my brother Dino back in Phoenix, Arizona. I got reception. I called him. And he goes, so what movie are you working on? It's called Lord of the Rings. It's like, I said, just wait till it comes out. It's like, nobody's going to believe that this stuff is real. And as far as the locations and stuff, because it looks so CG, but what I mean is a good CG. It just looks just so it's so incredible. It's like it's
like a fantasy world, isn't it? It's like you've gone back in time or something.
Yeah. And plus seeing everybody in costume. And it's like, and everything just fit in. And, one of the cool things that I always say is I think one of the big reasons why the film was so successful, not just because of the genius of Peter, Fran, and Philippa, and of course the workshop and everything, but is because everything was all under one umbrella, under one roof. Weta Workshop did the makeup effects, the costume, the armor, the weapons, the miniatures, or the bigatures as they called them, because they were massive. and also the digital effects, and I always say that if this film had gone to Los Angeles, it would have been like, Rick Baker would have got the makeup effects, another company would have got the armor and weapons, and it all gets spread out, and every shop kind of puts their stamp on it, so you can always kind of tell. And when it comes on screen, I've seen this so many times where it just doesn't quite meld together. It doesn't feel like it all belongs there.
And because you come to work on Avatar, which is like, one of the big kind of movies of 2009. And obviously, it kind of revolutionized the sort of 3D technology, and everyone wanted to, shoot in 3D or post convert, which was kind of a bit of a shambles. But because that film would again have multiple effects companies on it, because it was such a big project, wasn't it? Because the stuff you've been on, as you were saying, sort of things being farmed out. Did you find it for yourself, or probably the visual effects supervisor, such a nightmare to sort of keep everything consistent throughout?
They did, yeah. And again, it's just because it was just, having kind of like one giant eyeball over the whole thing to keep an eye on it, and to make sure that everything fit in together. And I think that's the problem these days with a lot of the projects that we may be working on, is because of the deadlines. And the deadlines is the main thing. Is because there just isn't enough time to have everybody working on that one project to meet that deadline. Therefore, it has to get split up between other companies. And of course, the other companies do some really amazing work together. And it's like it's a really tricky job for the supervisors, just to make sure that what we're doing is going to be the same as what they're doing, and vice versa. So it's
exactly.
pretty tricky. Yeah, it's pretty massive.
You'd come to work on Prometheus under Weta Digital. Were you sort of quite happy to be back in the fold of the sort of alien universe, or?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I loved it.
Because the image behind you, you've got the engineer in the chair. So seeing that sort of being realized and visualized on screen for the first time, and sort of well, not the first time, but seeing it sort of come to life, so to speak.
And that was really cool, and just to see the storyboards and how it all kind of came to fruition, and to see it come to life was like, now it makes sense. Okay, that was so cool. So we got to do a lot of work on that, on the engineer, as far as the helmet and everything that comes apart, and
oh wow,
and that was just pretty incredible. We worked with a great supervisor at Weta Digital. His name's Martin Hill, who's at the helm of that looked after that stuff. Yeah, but it was just great to be back in the alien world once again, and yeah, lots of fun.
As a sort of, you're a fan of movie making, you're a fan of these kind of genre pictures. In the 90s, was there a particular movie you kind of missed out on working on, which you think, damn it, I wish I'd worked on that film, but because you were committed to something? Jurassic Park. Were you kind of, were you in the sort of talks to be involved with that, or was it just something you'd wish you'd jumped onto?
Something I'd wished, because I was at the time I was busy working with Alec and Tom over at ADI on the projects and stuff, and so I think that's why I mentioned that's the one place that I kind of not regrets, because I don't believe in regrets, but it's like I wish I could have been involved working with the guys over at Stan Winston Studios, and those guys just did such incredible work. And I was invited to go to the screening of the first Jurassic Park, and just sitting a few chairs down from me was Ray Harryhausen, and they invited him out. And I was probably more watching Ray than watching the movie, because he was looking at the scene of the dinosaurs, and it was almost like you see his eyes kind of welling up, and it was just like, he says, "Oh my God, these things they're alive," and just really incredible. Yeah, I think there's other films as well, but I think that was probably one of the big ones for me. It's like, I wish I could have been involved with that, and of course Planet of the Apes. I wish I could have been over at Rick Baker's working on Planet of the Apes on that.
Yeah, well, because you've gone kind of full circle, really, because you got really into sort of filmmaking due to Planet of the Apes, but then you'd come to work on the new trilogy at Weta Digital. Now, this must have been a dream come true for you, because you sort of what inspired you, you're now working on, and in terms of, like, I think Weta Digital's work, I think the Planet of the Apes trilogy is probably, I'd say, some of their best work to date, I think. Because it
Yeah,
still,
absolutely.
I think, still looks so real.
It was definitely a dream come true for me to be able to work on those shows, and I'll never forget that when the word was out that we were going to be working on Planet of the Apes, I was getting a
Mm.
lot of emails and phone calls from my friends back in LA saying, "Hey, Gino," it says, we hear you guys doing Planet of the Apes. Says, my bags are packed. I've got my makeup kit. I'm ready to come out. And it's like, because I read the script and I thought, oh, well, there's no makeup. And it's like, damn, it's all going to be, CG stuff. And so I had to explain to them, it's like, well, sorry, but there's no makeup stuff. It's all going to be, digital, just because these apes, they look like apes, and there's no way that that even the best makeup is gonna be able to pull this kind of thing off. And they're going to say, "Oh, you traitor!" I said, "You got to the dark side." It's like, yeah, I know. I said, just wait. But it was incredible. But the thing that I brought to the table, because I was looking after the textures department, is because of my fascination and my love of apes. Is that I brought my whole collection out to New Zealand of castings of ape hands and feet and faces and all that kind of stuff, which we use to scan, to get the right kind of proportions and the right kind of textures. And I had a friend back in Los Angeles who had a compound where he raised chimps and orangs, and so I would always go out there to go study them and go play with them as well. And so I had lots of amazing footage and everything. So I think I can say that a little bit of me is definitely in those films. It really helped out. And even here, it's like, this is my desk. You can see this is my ape collection here.
Oh wow, that is amazing! Look at that. That's fantastic.
And I've also got to become great friends with Jane Goodall. And the cool thing about that and the way that happened, I always had this idea of taking her hand cast and with a chimp hand cast and making a statue.
Oh wow, look at that. That is awesome.
So this is Jane's hand holding a chimp's hand here. And so we made these, and having them produced in LA at my friend's company called Bone Clones. So if you go to boneclones.com, they do reproductions of skulls and skeletons and that kind of stuff.
So Gino, out of all the movies you've worked on, what do you think what are you most proud of? What is is there one particular film, or is there sort of a bunch of movies that you think that is the sort of my best work to date?
I can't really pick on just one thing, because it's on every film that I worked on, it's you learn something new, and working on coming up with a paint scheme for the silicone. One of my favorite pieces that we did was back on Wolf, which we didn't talk about, with Jack Nicholson and Michelle Pfeiffer and James Spader. But we did this incredible these puppet heads of James Spader and Jack Nicholson. And just looked so cool. And we were working with Rick Baker on that. Rick was doing the makeup on Jack and stuff, and James, and we were doing these incredible puppet heads. So that's still one of my favorite pieces, just because it reminded me of something of like that Rob Bottin would do, with these really elongated jaws and that kind of stuff. It just looks so cool. And of course, definitely with on Lord of the Rings. Working on that show, it's just the amount of work that everybody did and the talents that were involved were just incredible. And I can't explain what an incredible experience that was. And sadly, it's that we'll probably never experience that ever again, because things have changed so much. And it's, of course, when we did Hobbit, it just wasn't the same. We had a great time on that, but it just wasn't the same as that.
Was it just down to the sort of schedule was just too tight to sort of be that flexible with the effects, or was it just a sort of how the industry had changed at that point?
I think a little bit of both, but I think it was, and some of the issues with that, because originally it was going to be Guillermo del Toro who was going to direct it.
Yeah, it was going to be 2 films, wasn't it? I think
it was, yeah,
3. And
it was great to hang out with Guillermo out here, and so much time had passed, for him waiting to direct it, that it finally got to the point, and because we had problems with the unions and that kind of stuff in Australia, things, and it was a huge mess, and so much time had been wasted, that he had other projects that he had to go back to do, so he had to leave, sadly. And it was so weird because I had this when I had heard that Guillermo was going to be directing it. Nothing against Guillermo or anything, but it's just like I was a little bit bummed out that Peter wasn't going to direct it, just to keep it all tied in together.
Consistent, like, thing.
Exactly, yeah. But at the same time, it was exciting to have Guillermo's ideas, that something a bit fresh, to come into the picture. And he had some incredible ideas and things, and I hope someday it gets all put into a book or something. But again, with Hobbit, it was there was with the way that the technology had changed so much, and they went and did so much more CG characters and with the orcs and that kind of stuff. So it was less makeup stuff. And in fairness, it's like, I was talking with one of the producers on it. It's like, well, the thing is, like, when you guys do the makeup stuff, we have to get the artist in here, the actor, at 3 a.m. It takes you guys 4 or 5 hours to do the makeup, and then another like 2 hours to get them out of the makeup. And here you can do it, just as well, with CG stuff. And it's like, oh, it's just not the same. It's like but we did get to do quite a bit of prosthetic makeups on the orcs and stuff. And my friend Tammy Lane was looking after the makeup stuff on that show. It's almost like you have too many options now, to do something. It's almost like I use Photoshop on a daily basis, and it's like, you can do layers. And so it gives me the freedom to, it's like, oh, I wonder what it would look like with a purple stripe, and I don't want to paint it on my base layer, so I'll do a layer. And if I don't like it, I'll take it off.
Yeah.
But back in the days when I would paint something on an illustration or paint it on a maquette or something, if I put on that purple stripe and they didn't like it, I was like, oh crap, okay, well I got to take that off, and it's a huge thing. So it's an interesting one. It weighs up where there's positive things on both sides,
Oh, for sure. I think moving forward, I think there's always going to be, like, if filmmakers can provide a great mix of both, then I think everyone will sort of kind of be happy with the end results. That's where these movies will end up standing the test of time in that way.
And plus, it'll keep us old timers busy and employed.
Exactly. So what are you currently working on at the moment? Obviously now, because the lockdown and pandemic, it's kind of slowed things down and pushed things back. But for you, what are you looking forward to working on?
Well, we're still working on the Avatar films with
Oh,
James.
yes.
Yeah. So
Avatar 1, 2, 3, 4. How many? I lost count.
I think like 15. I think. No, I'm kidding. No, they're gonna be amazing.
That's the thing, isn't it? Because James Cameron, I think there was a sort of, because he's been taken so long, there's been a lot of bit of people like, do we want to see Avatar 2? Everyone's kind of a little bit just kind of moved on, but James Cameron has rarely ever disappointed anyone. Everything he does, when it comes out, boom, it's like the biggest thing. So
it's going to be amazing. It really is. And he's taken the time to really, to focus on the stories, because it's like which he does with all his films. It's like, everything has a nice balance of effects and a great story, but first and most, you need to have a great story. And Jim is a great storyteller. And so I don't think he's going to let anybody down.
Good. I can't wait. Well, Gino, thank you so much for taking part. You're wonderful to talk to. It just loads of great information. You had a great career, and I wish you all the best in future. I can't wait to see more of your work on
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I love watching you, and I love all your reviews. And it's been very entertaining. Thank you.